Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So yesterday I did a bit of testing. You guys have been poking me to test out the Paranoid Delusion again with module 22. We basically had a rework to the companion gear that no longer do we have indomitable runestones, we just have one overarching enchantment, the companion enhancement, which when it's on mythic can give your companion, if it's an active companion, 150% extra damage. Now as for augments, that's giving us 7,500 stats along with their base augmentation. So running a companion like the Owlbear Cub will give you nearly 30,000 of your ratings, and this is a massive boost when you're trying to max out your character to deal damage. Now the point I've been standing behind is if you can deal over 500,000 encounter DPS, you need to go and run an Augment Companion instead. And the main reason because of this, when we look at the math, an Augment Companion will only give you about 13% damage difference, because if you go and rejig your stats so that you're capped and everything, which you can still do with an active companion, but you'll only have like 60% accuracy, whereas if you run an augment you can pretty much have 90% accuracy and a 90% across the board on all your stats, so you lose about 13% damage. So 13% of 500,000 would mean your companion would have to deal about 65,000 encounter DPS to compete with just the bonus from the augment. And so we go and summon our pseudodragon, which is known to be the famed best companion, and we can have a look at our damage results. We're getting about 58,000 encounter DPS, which is less than our 65,000 encounter DPS that we would on average get from having an augment companion, due to that being 13% of over 500,000. Now if you have more DPS than this, we nearly have 600,000, then it's even better to run an augment. But realistically, it's not that easy to get over 500,000 encounter DPS within the new trial for the later phases. It's doable. I've got to about 550,000 encounter DPS, but you're gonna have to work for it and never die. So let's check out this Paranoid Delusion. Now unfortunately, this will depend on what class you're on, and I'm intending to, and I'm working on some further testing with other classes. You can see it will mimic one of your at-will powers, which will vary depending on your class. Now on a rogue, it's really good because they go and they copy our Duelist Flurry, which is a nice fast hitting at-will power. We can see basically the Paranoid Delusion will turn into an image of me, a spitting image of me just looking all a bit purple, and it uses the Duelist Flurry. And looking on the combat log, we have our pet here, and yeah, you can see it can deal up to about nearly 75,000 encounter DPS, of course when it's using that Duelist Flurry burst. And we've gone and tested it for a long period of time. And you can see here, after like a 26-minute test, we have our Paranoid Delusion nearly dealing 74,000 encounter DPS. That's a massive jump, as you can see, from the Pseudodragon at 58,000 to the Paranoid Delusion with 74,000. That's a boost of a nearly 30% extra damage by using the Paranoid Delusion over the Pseudodragon as your active companion. Now it does not come without its negatives, because you're going to have to rework your build. You're going to have to be trying to make sure you're still capped on these and using accuracy as your dump stat, and then technically the Paranoid Delusion will be the new best striker companion for the new trial. Now that leads to question, what about those later phases in the trial where your companion might die a lot? And we've tested the Pseudodragon in the trial, and yes, it dies a lot and deals very little damage in those later phases. Now is this true for the Paranoid Delusion? Well, let's have a look at some more combat logs here. Here we start out in phase 1. Here we have phase 1 of the new trial, lasting about 1 minute and 50 seconds there, and we can see that this is our pet. It dealt about 75,000 encounter DPS. That's great. Now my build on live is a little bit worse than my build on the previous server, so technically it could deal more damage than that if I tweaked my build optimally. This is within phase 1, however, where you have the ideal scenario. You can see this is a warlock here. He can deal some massive damage, and he's out DPSing me if I exclude my pet from my damage. So we go into the later phases. Unfortunately, I don't have it split up, but we can see overall our pet now was only dealing on average about 22.66 thousand encounter DPS. That's terrible. That's less than 5% of my overall damage when I'm dealing 426,000 encounter DPS. Albeit, yes, I died a good few times. It was not a great run for me, but nonetheless, if it's not going to be a great run for me, it should still be pretty good for your companion. Your companion is still going to die just as many times by standing in all of those red areas, just dying and then waiting like 5 seconds to respawn. And it can also end up just hitting the invisible dragon and dealing no damage for a period of time, which is just terrible. So overall, this new companion, the new best striker companion, at least on a rogue, I'll have to do more testing with other classes because again, it just copies your at-will power. We can see when we're all buffed up and in combat, we can indeed get our stats pretty nicely capped out. Since here we go, we have our power, we have our combat advantage, we have our crit severity, critical strikes just a bit shy. However, we can get that buffed up when we are in a trial where we run with a paladin who has the crit aura. We can also use, let's say, our class feature, still figuring out which is best, whether hastily sharpened blades or the back alley tactics is best. In my opinion, they're very close. And from what I've seen, hastily sharpened blades can basically make your average crit chance be like 97% if you're capping crit still. So overall, it's still very doable to get pretty nice spread of stats with an active companion, and thus in most content where the boss isn't moving around a lot, you can see that yes, this active companion can deal a lot of damage. However, if we look at our damage, if we had an augment, we'd deal about the same amount of damage as Psy, about 800,000. We could deal more if we optimize our timing. Then this Paranoid Delusion is still dealing less than 10% of our damage. We need it to deal more than 13%. Again, looking at that formula, 13% damage difference. So right now, if you're dealing up to like 800,000 encounter DPS, it's not worth to run an active companion. You're better off with just having a augment companion to buff your own damage. Here you can see here's another phase 1. I deal, over 800,000 encounter DPS there. And we can look in the later phases of the trial. Here's me not running an active companion, just with an augment, and I can nearly hit 500,000 encounter DPS even with dying, and we can't reach that when we have an active companion. Sure, I could have performed better than this without dying a bunch of times. I believe my augment did die a few times there, so I believe I only died one time in that run. So there we have it, my overview with the Paranoid Delusion. It's been adjusted so that it now works with the new combat enchantment. With regards to Warlord Inspiration insignias, they seem to have no effect on it still. So with that said, hopefully this was somewhat insightful to you guys. And if I presented this well, consider leaving the video a like. And if you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.